Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Edmund J. Safra Synagogue. I am Rabbi Ally, I'm the rabbi of the synagogue, and it gives me great pleasure and honor to welcome you tonight. Tonight's debate is Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, which is the true religion of peace. It's a pleasure to have with us our two panelists of tonight, Rabbi Shmuley Boteach, known by many of us as host of Oprah and Friends. He has his daily show at 12 and also at 5 p.m. Is the winner of the London Times Preacher of the Year 2000, and author of 20 books. Most of them are available tonight downstairs in the lobby of this synagogue. Our second guest, Dr. Douglas Jacoby, is author, teacher, and founder of Athens Institute of Ministry. He received his BA in History from Duke University, his Master's in Theological Studies and the New Testament from Harvard University, and a doctorate in the Ministry of Christian Education from Drew University. Welcome, and it's a pleasure to have you both here tonight.
Thank you.
Our third panelist of the night is Imam Shabir Ally, who is the president of the Islamic Information and Dawah Centre International. Unfortunately, unable to make it, he sent us a note which he asked us to read to you. He writes that the explanation is that the U.S. border officials did not let him through. Since 9/11/2001, many imams have had difficulties entering the United States. I have had my fair share of such difficulties as well. I suppose it is a rite of passage, and I am finally being recognized as an imam. No specific reason is given for refusing me entry. After a few hours of waiting, during which time the officials interrogate me in intervals, they eventually inform me that the decision handed down to them from Washington is that I will not be allowed in. It is frustrating that after cooperating with them fully, answering all their questions, having my bags and wallet and pockets searched, the decision comes from someone I have never met, and I have no idea on what basis the decision was made. I suppose they are under no obligation to give a reason. After there seems to be no reasonable recourse to this treatment, this is at first seemed strange to me when it was reported to me of others, but I had to experience it myself to believe it. I am a Canadian citizen, he writes, and I have been for a quarter of a century. Normally, I should be able to enter the U.S. with no problems. One would expect that with my regular appearance on television and public programs internationally, that my moderate views would count for something at the border. But there, I suppose every imam is considered guilty of something until proven innocent. Signed, Shabir Ally. So we regret that he's unable to attend tonight's debate. And at this moment, I open the debate with Dr. Douglas Jacoby.
Thank you very much. And I spoke today to Shabir Ally, and we were both very sad. We were all three very sad. But he has invited Shmuley and me to Toronto. Anytime next year we can work out, because we think that maybe we will be able to get Canadian visas. We hope. It's just crazy what's happening here. So Judaism and Christianity, which is the religion of peace. This is still our topic. I've had a chance to visit many synagogues around the world, to be in a number of synagogue services. Earlier this year I was in Budapest in the historic synagogue of Hungary, but I've never been invited to speak in a synagogue. I've never spoken as a guest, and I want to thank you, Elia, for the invitation, for opening up this beautiful building, and I want to thank everyone here. Whatever your religion, whatever your faith may be, thank you for being here this evening. As we talk about the subject of peace, I think it's important to make a distinction between religions as they started out and as they've developed. The historical development of faith, the scriptures, the pure form of the religion versus what's actually played out in history. I think it's also important to talk about tolerance, what tolerance and intolerance actually are. And so my opening statement, I'll be dealing with these concepts before you hear from Shmuley Boteach. Let me share a few thoughts about Judaism from my perspective. Judaism historically, of course, is a political religion because the state and the people of God are one. And these are how the laws of the Torah work. There's, of course, a tremendous emphasis on love for neighbor. There are even many passages about love for the enemy. There are passages about caring for the poor. At the same time, because Judaism in its original form is a political movement, it entails all the things that governments rely upon, from coercion to maintain order to warfare. And although it's a bit of a dirty word, I think it would be the right word to use if we're talking about the Canaanites, the word that's been coined in the 20th century of genocide. And so if you want to look at the historical faith of Judaism, it's an interesting mixture of peace and violence. And I say this not to offend, because I will say much stronger things about Christianity. So bear with me just a moment. In addition, in the Hebrew Scriptures, we have a number of death penalties. By my count, 17 or perhaps 18 different death penalties. Because pristine Judaism required a nation state, again, all the things that accompany such a political unit are present. And even though modern Israel is a secular state, there are some parallels there. Of course, after the Assyrian exile of the 8th century and the Babylonian exile of the 6th century BC, Judaism became fairly apolitical in many respects. After the Maccabean revolt in the 2nd century BC, there was a political autonomy once again, and then that went when Pompey, the Roman general, came in 63 BC. And especially after 70 AD, with the destruction of the temple, Judaism has been apolitical. Now, in that respect, through most of the history of Judaism, wherever you date the Exodus up until the 1st century AD, and then from then until now, most of the history of Judaism has actually been fairly peaceful. And so it's not only true that in my view, most of the people I know who are Jewish are very, very peaceful. I went to a mainly Jewish high school. Most of my friends were Jewish when I grew up in New Jersey. It's a suburb of New York, very close to here. But to be fair, historically, there are elements of violence that are inscripturated. But in most of Jewish history, of course, it's been peaceful. And partly because of the terrible treatment at the hand of those who claim to be Christians, the Jews have found a way to survive. And I would agree with Rabbi Boteach's assessment that they have served very much as a moral conscience for others who really should know better. What about Christianity? Early Christianity was a very peaceful religion. When I say early, what do I mean? Do I mean the first day, the first week? No, actually, I mean, for the most part, the first 3 centuries. Things changed drastically in the 4th century. But in the beginning, when Jesus was interrogated by Pontius Pilate, he said, "My kingdom's not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my followers would fight to prevent my arrest." Earlier, 12 chapters earlier, in John chapter 6, verse 15, his followers got a bit enthusiastic about his being the Messiah. They decided to come and make him king by force. He retreated immediately because politics was not his way, nor was it the way of the early church. All this changed in the 4th century after the end of the most terrible persecution, the Diocletian persecution, which ended in the early years of the 300s. Persecution stopped, and then there was a formal edict to prevent it. And then Constantine, the Roman emperor, allied himself with the bishops of the Mediterranean. For whatever reasons he did, Christianity changed its relationship with the Roman government, and now it was a church state. And by the end of the 4th century, all the ugly things that went in there were coming in. Firstly, towards non-believers. Pagans were ordered to report to churches for catechism, or your property will be confiscated and you will be exiled. The Jews were actually treated fairly kindly, relatively speaking, in the 4th century. As we know, this would not last. But the most bitter treatment that the church dealt out was to fellow Christians. And I could quote the words of a 4th century historian, Ammianus, who said, "No one outdoes the Christians in their mutual hatred for one another." That is not a statement that could have been made in the year 305 or 310, but by 380, 390, absolutely. The treatment of Muslims with the Muslim movement in the 7th century on was abysmal. The treatment of the Jews, particularly later in the Middle Ages, it's really beyond words. What can be said about this? And this was done in the name of Christ. The positions taken by such men as Augustine, Luther, Calvin, the Puritans, and Rome make you embarrassed to even be called a Christian. The Radical Reformation was nearly alone in all the Protestant Reformation for taking a stand and renouncing violence. I'm a U.S. citizen, but what I'm about to say may make you wonder if I want to retain the citizenship, but I do.